An opportunity that I had with my brothers to go game viewing. And so we go to the game park. We had a house up there in Lake Kariba in Zimbabwe, and that's where we'd go for our holidays. And the best time to see the animals, if you wanted to go game viewing, is in the late evening when they're going down to the water hole to drink. It's kind of the centralized point where all the animals gather. So the sun was setting and we were in a bit of a hurry, and my brother David was driving the Land Rover, and myself and my brother Jonathan were standing in the back of the Land Rover, and we're looking for animals. So he's driving, and we're standing in the back of the truck holding the roll bar like this, and we're looking off into the bush to see what kind of animals we could see. Now the bush is kind of passing by us pretty quickly, so you can't look immediately at what's passing. You've got to kind of gaze outwards a little bit, and that's kind of what we're doing. So I'm looking on this side, my younger brother's looking over on that side, and we come around the corner of this dirt track, and all of a sudden the Land Rover comes to a stop, and there's kind of a billow of dust. My brother was driving a little fast on that road, and as the dust, and I'm looking like this, and I turn my eyes and look, and there's a pride of lions in the middle of the road. And as soon as the vehicle comes to a stop, I mean, it happens just this quick. The vehicle comes to a stop, I kind of see them at the same time they see me, and one of the lionesses gets up out of the group and starts to come around the side of the vehicle. Now, I know many of you have probably been to the zoo, and you've probably seen lions in the zoo. There's something very different about the lions in the zoo compared to the ones that are out in the wild. And when that lioness locked eyes with me, I knew she wanted to eat me. It's just this look that a predatory animal has. When she locked eyes with me and I locked eyes with her, I just knew I was her dinner. And she started to come around the side, and the whole time I'm looking at her, and she's coming around the side of the vehicle. As she's getting over here, I grab my younger brother, and I realize he hasn't even seen the lions yet. He's going, what? Why did we stop? He hasn't recognized what's right here in front. We're kind of just looking out there. So I grab him, and I said, kind of like this, get in the front, get in the front, get in the front. And I'm grabbing him, pushing him. He's going, what? He's looking at me, a little scared because of my reaction. And then we jump down on the side of the Land Rover, and we jump into the cab. Now in Zimbabwe, we drive on the other side of the vehicle. So my brother was on this side driving. The lioness had come next to him over here, and we jumped off on that side. And to this day, I'm telling you, I had nightmares thinking about I never looked to see what was on this side of the vehicle. Do you know you have that horror movie kind of thing where you have these dreams, and it's the unseen thing that's so scary? I never even looked to see what was over there. I had so concentrated on her, and it reminded me of that movie Jurassic Park, where the guy was so concentrated on the one, then the other pops up and says, "Oh, clever girl." They would have got us so easily. We're so easy prey. So I jumped down in, I said, get in the front, get in the front. We jump down, and we jump in. Now I'm sitting right next to my brother, and I grab him, and I go, drive, go, drive. And he turns to me and says, relax. What's going on? What's the matter? Calm down. What do you mean, calm down? Go. So we drive off, and another cloud of dust, and the lions kind of get up and move out of the way. And we go down to the watering hole, and we see a few impala, and we're like, what are we doing? Nothing was cooler than seeing the lions. What are we looking at impala for? So we turned around, and we go back. We're looking at the lions on the headlights. It's gotten dark, and it's kind of scary at night. They're even more intimidating. They're kind of looking at the vehicle, and we're like, ooh. And my brother David, he still teases us. Says, you guys wet your pants. You were so scared. And I keep reminding him, you were outside with the lions. Yeah. You can be as brave as you want, inside of the cab. And you may be saying, oh, well, Pastor Daniel, that's great. That's a great story. But how does that relate to what we're talking about today? Well, the fact of the matter is the Bible tells us that our enemy, the devil, we mentioned this last week, roams around like a roaring lion seeking who he may devour. And we can be on the outside of the cab, outside of the safety of being in that relationship with God. And just imagine, you recognize it. You know there's an enemy. You know there's a devil out there that's out to get your loved ones, your family, your friend. You know that. Now imagine if you just left them in the back of the Land Rover and jumped down and got in the cab with Jesus. And you're like, all right, I'm safe. I'm in the family of God. But you're on your own. That's not the attitude that we want to take. We have to have the same type of urgency in recognizing that for each and every one of us, tomorrow is not promised to any of us. We have no guarantee in the broken, fallen world that we live in that we might even make it home tonight. And we should have the same type of urgency to grab our loved ones, to grab those that are lost, to say, get in the front, get in with Jesus, get in with Jesus, get in where it's safe, get in when you're in relationship with the Lord. That's the kind of urgency, that's the kind of picture we have of hearing these different stories of the Father seeking out those that are lost. There's a sense of urgency, a sense of importance for those that are lost, a heart that we should have towards those that are lost, to grab a hold of them and say, come on in the cab. And I remember when I was a young person, I was in the cab. I was in a relationship with God. I was in a relationship with Jesus. But I'm looking outside of the cab, and I'm seeing my friends going to parties, and they're doing all of this different stuff, and going to nightclubs, and when you're inside the cab, sometimes you can be looking out and say, man, these are all running around, and boy, they sure look at them frolicking and having a good time. They're jumping, and boy, doesn't that just look great? And there's this false sense that things here seem to be safe and seem to be, not a whole lot going on. But out there in the world, there seems to just be so much more activity and more fun. As a young person, I thought, boy, all my friends are just having so much fun. Never mind, the reason they're running around so much is because the devil's after them and the lions are chasing them. We don't see that part. Yeah. And now today, a lot of my friends that back in high school, man, they would go to parties and doing this, that, and the other. I can't tell you how many of them have actually lost to drugs and to alcohol and just the destruction that has taken place in their lives. And I'm so thankful that I came to my senses and God got a hold of me and brought me back into that relationship with Him. And how many of you have the same testimony, amen? That God grabbed you and brought you back into relationship with Him. And that's what's so amazing about this story of the prodigal son. And I want to propose to you that the story is actually of the prodigal sons. Because didn't the father have to go outside and get both of them and bring them both back, both for different reasons? The one that had spent his whole inheritance and just gone out and partied, you see that when he came home, the father, representing God, didn't say, oh, you again? What are you? Oh, man, you took your inheritance and you wasted it. And, man, you took that whole relationship that we had and man, you burned your bridges. I'm not accepting you back. You're too far gone. Man, you did what? You spent all your money on prostitutes? Oh, man, we don't accept that here in God's house. You're going to have to go somewhere. Was that the reaction of the father? Not at all. That might have been the reaction of the Pharisees or the older brother. But what we see is the heart of God is He saw that young son coming from a long way off. That kind of gives you an indication that He was looking for him. He was waiting for him. And no sooner did that young man make a turn towards home than Dad came down off of the ramparts, ran down the road and greeted him. And when he greeted him, he wrapped him up in a hug. He said, he grabbed him by the neck, he kissed him on the neck. And here the young guy's like, wow, okay, look, I would just be happy to be a servant in your household. But the father says, no. Bring me the best robe. Just representing God's righteousness. Let's just cover over all of those things that we're ever doing. We're just going to cover over that. And then he says, put on the ring. And you know what the ring signifies? Everywhere you read in the Bible where it says the king gave his ring, for instance, to Mordecai, or the king gave his ring to another, it gives all of the authority. His sonship was restored to him. He had all of the authority back of the father. The father says, you're not a servant in my household. You're my son. You're my daughter. Restored him in that relationship. Then he said, bring sandals for his feet, just signifying that this young man had been on a journey and he needs new shoes. We're going to take off those old. You're on a new journey. You're on a new road. You're on a new path. You need some new shoes. Completely restored him. Then he brings him home, and now we have the reaction of the older brother. And unfortunately, for many, many that are lost, that are brought back into the house of God, they have to face the older brother.
Yeah.
There was an instance in Clute where Crystal and I were youth and associate pastors, where we would go shop at the local grocery store, and there was a young lady there that we would talk to every time we went. Just like when you guys go, she's at the grocery store now sometimes 2 times a day. I mean, with 5 kids, invariably you go to the grocery store at least every other day. We're at the grocery store, and Crystal knows all of those people by name. She greets them, she's prayed for them. In fact, one of the ladies came to Thanksgiving at our house, so she didn't have anywhere to go. She said, come to our house. And here comes the lady from Kroger, came and had Thanksgiving with us. And this exact same thing back in Clute, in Lake Jackson, we were there and just witnessed to this lady and just was friendly to her, and we invited her to church. In fact, there was a women's event that was coming up, and she came to that event and she was wonderfully, gloriously saved. She gave her heart to the Lord in just a wonderful way, just tears streaming down her face. She was born again, she gave her heart to the Lord, and she started coming to church. It wasn't long after that, the pastor's wife took her aside and said, we have some clothes for you. We have some dresses that some of the ladies had got together to give to you. And without ever saying, some of the clothes that she wore might have been a little more appropriate for a night out on the town and not church, without saying any of those things, just said, we have some clothes for you, and she was so thankful for those, and she took that in a good way, and she started singing on the choir, and she was doing so well. And then we noticed we didn't see her again for a couple of Sundays, and then we'd miss her. When we go to the grocery store, instead of coming up and greeting us, she would turn the other way, and she would avoid us. And, after a certain amount of time, I think Crystal was able to corner her and say, hey, how are you? We haven't seen you in a while. And after breaking through the ice a little bit, she let us know that one day after singing, on a Sunday morning, singing in the choir, she came down off the platform and was coming down. They leave through a back door of the stage, and kind of, without disturbing everybody, they come around, and then they come in the back and sit down. The choir would sit in the seats. That as she was coming down the hallway, one of the ladies in the church had pulled her aside and told her, because she had tattoos on her body, she could not be a Christian and enter the kingdom of heaven. God would not accept her as a child of God, because she had tattooed her body. She was so heartbroken from that, she didn't even come back and sit down in the church. She left and didn't come back. Can you imagine how I felt when I heard that story? Boy, I'd like to talk to that lady. And just I'd like to read her that story and explain to her how she was like that older brother. That God's heart is so for the lost and restoring those that are lost. He doesn't care. If he wouldn't care about this young man spending everything on prostitutes and doing all of the things that are described in this story, he doesn't care what sins you've committed. He doesn't care what background you have. He doesn't care how bad you think it is. When you're saved, you're saved. Amen? When you're brought into the family of God, he puts the robe on you. He puts the ring on you, and he gives you a new pair of shoes, and he says, kill the fatted calf. That's for each and every sinner that comes into the family of God. Amen?
Amen.
But we have to be so careful that we don't have the attitude of the older brother, that we are judgmental or that we're jealous. And that's what's portrayed here, is this young man, the older brother, he says to the father, your son that was lost has now come, and you didn't even give me a goat. In other words, look at all the wonderful things God is doing for these that are lost. But I've served God my whole life, and God never did any of that for me. And all too often, there's people that are driven away from the church, and it's got nothing to do with God driving them away, but it's the people in the church themselves that are maybe judgmental or maybe that can't accept them because, oh no, you're living a lifestyle that I don't agree with, or you did things in the world that are just, no, we don't do that around here. And I want to rather have the heart of the Father that just says, none of that matters. None of that matters at all. If it doesn't matter to God, it doesn't matter to me at all. I just love for people to come into the church and to be saved, and then let God work on them. Let God work on their hearts. Let God change them. Let's extend grace to those that are lost, the same as God extends grace to us. Because I'm telling you right now, I am the furthest from perfect of anybody you'll ever meet. And I know that we're all in the same boat. God's got stuff He's working on me. God's got stuff He's working on you. God's going to have stuff that He's working on them. And let God work on them. Let God touch their heart. Let God convict them and speak to them about those things. So here Jesus is confronting that in this story. When the Pharisees come to him and say, if you're hanging out, you're just hanging out with too much sinners. I felt that way. I felt, as described